The galaxy was amused when they learned that humans have rules of war. They were less amused when they figured out what humans do in war when there are no rules. Tarabounds thought that this whole hearing was a laughable farce as he maneuvered into his chair. His race, the Duthram, were a reddish spherical entity with one eye that moved with one single long appendage and had been nicknamed by the humans as mono people. How could you enforce rules in war? War is when negotiations have broken down. What could possibly convince an enemy to do as you agreed when each of you is slaughtering the other? You can't have a war without death. What fate is worse? Do you plan to outlaw killing? Tarabounds jeered, his arm weaving words in a sort of sign language. How do you expect to reduce the impact of war without rendering the point moot? Our entire civilization's going to set up little target dummies and see who can shoot it at the best? Major James Taylor sat in his chair staring at Tarabounds as his mad arm wiggling was translated to English. Did he really need to start from there? Perhaps aliens were fine with a bit more cruelty and unnecessary death in life, but could this thing not understand some would want to minimize unnecessary death? With all due respect, Ambassador Tarabounds, we would only ask that civilians and other non-combatants such as injured soldiers be spared. They have little to no impact on who will win a war, and the rules we propose would only seek to minimize casualties. We understand that a warring entity has motivation to fire on military locations even if there are a few civilians that will be caught in the crossfire. Questioned Tarabounds in his head. What tangible benefit could humans get in war from getting the enemy to ignore civilians? No one shoots at civilians. By definition, their elimination would not hinder the enemy's war effort. Why would anyone waste ammunition on civilians? What is the point in killing that which cannot fight? Tarabounds asked, confused. James was taken aback. Was this alien not familiar with basic morale-hindering tactics? If the women and children you were protecting were killed, then what was the point of war? Killing civilians was an excellent way to discourage stronger parties to avoid warring with you in the future. Could most aliens just ignore this? Was he about to reveal a major strategic disadvantage of humans? If you do not understand, then there is no point to this conversation. James vaguely answered and left the hearing. He knew it was rude, but he needed to warn the higher-ups. Perhaps they would need a show of force. A notification to the world that they could handle civilian casualties. Tarabounds pondered his short conversation with Mr. Taylor. It was not until he watched the United Human Army tear apart the homeworld of the Parkiti and devastate any hope of meaningful spoils of war did he begin to realize. At first he thought that the humans were just terrible at aiming. Why else would they ruin any potential loot from that planet? He was worried that their shoddy inaccurate weaponry would perhaps hit his hive cluster as well. It was then he realized, he was worried. Scared. Frightened. He felt fear that if his race declared war that he would die. The humans were mad enough to expend resources on needless slaughter because it discouraged others from warring to meet the same fate. The worst part was that it worked. Perhaps a few rules of war were a good thing. James had mixed feelings when he received a call stating in no plain terms that they wanted to introduce the rules suggested. The inadvertent death of a planet he realized he might have caused weighed heavy on his heart. He also didn't want the hassle of having to explain the ethos of cruel weaponry. He could imagine Tarabounds angrily wobbling about how effective weapons killed the target instantly. Why should anyone use weapons that cause others to suffer?